I'm Diane Macedo. Today on ABC News Live. 1 week to go until the midterm elections. We're in the battleground states with the candidates to watch, the key issues for voters, and the races that could determine control of Congress. The man accused of violently attacking House Speaker Pelosi's husband is now facing state and federal charges. What we're learning about his alleged motive and what police say he would have done if the speaker were home. And we could soon have a vaccine for RSV. Pfizer is releasing positive early results as rising cases drive a surge in child hospitalizations. Dr. John Brownstein is here with what parents and pregnant women need to know. But we begin with candidates and their campaigns making their final push just 1 week until Election Day. Our correspondents are following the latest developments in the key races around the country. Eva Pilgrim starts us off from Philadelphia. Hi, Eva.
Pennsylvania is shaping up to be an important test for both parties when it comes to blue-collar voters here in President Biden's birth state. The race that everyone is watching, the Senate seat. Current Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman versus TV doctor Mehmet Oz. Polls really tightening since last week's debate. There are concerns over Fetterman's health after a stroke more than 5 months ago. It could cost Democrats the seat pickup here, but at the same time, Dr. Oz facing criticism for being an out-of-touch carpetbagger as well as for a stance on abortion. And just to make it clear how important this race is, President Biden and former President Obama will both be in Pennsylvania over the weekend trying to get out the vote ahead of Election Day. Diane?
All right, Eva Pilgrim, thank you. Meanwhile, in Nevada, another key race is neck and neck. Republicans see the historically blue state Senate seat as a key target. ABC's Janae Norman has the latest from Las Vegas. Hi, Janae.
Yeah, we're here in Las Vegas, and here in Nevada, this is a state that's historically shown up big for Democrats, but it's not guaranteed to go blue next week. Republicans find themselves in the best position here in Nevada in a long, long time. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, the first and only Latina senator, is also the most vulnerable, polling showing her essentially neck and neck with her Republican opponent, Adam Laxalt, a former state attorney general who backed former President Trump in efforts to overturn the 2020 election results here. His family has actually come out supporting Cortez Masto, but in a state hit especially hard by the pandemic, Democrats have a tough sell to voters who are paying about $5 for a gallon of gas and facing skyrocketing rent prices. Tonight, former President Obama will be rallying here, trying to shore up some support as control of the Senate hangs in the balance, Diane.
All right, Janae Norman, thanks for that. And the battle of control of the Senate could also come down to Georgia once again. That race could be headed for a runoff. Steve Osunsami has the latest from Atlanta. Hi, Steve.
Diane, some of the latest polling out in Georgia this week has the race between incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican nominee and college football legend Herschel Walker at a virtual tie. And this is despite weeks of bad press for Herschel Walker, where he's essentially been called a hypocrite because of his position opposing abortion rights, even after woman keeps coming forward claiming that he either helped them pay for or get an abortion. There is also a third candidate in this race, a libertarian candidate, which means that it is entirely possible that neither of the two major candidates gets to 50% on Election Day, a week from today, which means this race could be headed to a runoff. If control of the U.S. Senate is decided by a December runoff election, it will be a very busy 4 weeks of mudslinging for voters here who have already had enough. Diane?
All right, Steve Osunsami, thank you. And let's bring in ABC News contributor Yvette Simpson, the CEO of the Progressive Political Action Committee, Democracy for America, along with Ramesh Ponnuru, the editor of the National Review. Thank you both for being here. Ramesh, I want to start with you. Republicans have rallied to defend Herschel Walker after he denied allegations that he paid for women to have abortions. What does Walker need to do in these last days of the campaign to flip that key Senate seat?
Well, I think what Walker has to do is stay on the offense and to pass the sort of minimum threshold test that voters have for what a senator is capable of in terms of articulating his positions and defending them. And at the same time, of course, draw the contrast with Senator Warnock. People have reservations about Walker, but the people that Walker needs to reach have serious disagreements with Warnock on policy.
Now, Yvette, 538's forecast shows the Pennsylvania Senate race in a dead heat. What does John Fetterman need to do to convince voters that his health is not an issue?
You know, I think he's doing the right thing in talking about him facing, you know, his disability now. People understand what it's like to go through a stroke. And the fact that Mehmet Oz is mocking that as a doctor is really unfortunate. And I think they're doing the right thing in saying that, you know, he is healing. He is working through the process with his doctors to get better. He is still the best representative for Pennsylvania, even in his condition. And then when he's better, he's going to go to Washington and bring back all the things that Pennsylvanians have been waiting for. He is the best representative. And so I think one of the things that he did really well in going forward with the debate was showing people that he is strong, that he will not sit down, that he will show himself honestly, even in that state. And I think that has engendered him, endeared him to a lot of people who might not have paid attention to him in the beginning.
And Ramesh, some researchers have said that abortion could turn out to be a sleeper issue in this election cycle. Our ABC News and Ipsos poll shows it as the third most important topic to voters behind the economy and inflation. And polls have shown that voters largely favor keeping abortion legal in many or all circumstances. So are you worried about how this issue could impact Republicans next week?
Well, I think that it could have an impact, but it is one that is much smaller than the impact of such issues as the economy, inflation, and jobs, which are, I think, front and center for most people. The fact is, there are Republican governors who have signed abortion restrictions who are right now sort of cruising to reelection. That's in Ohio, in Florida, in Georgia, and in Texas. And so I think that the potential of this issue to help the Democrats has really been overstated.
Now, Yvette, to Ramesh's point, President Biden has been focused on touting his economic policies in these last few weeks, but polls continue to show that voters do favor Republicans when it comes to getting the economy back on track. What more can Democrats do you think, on that front?
You know, it's difficult because, you know, history shows that Democrats actually do better with the economy when they're in leadership, and Biden's no exception. He's improved job numbers dramatically historically. The deficit is being reduced historically. But Republicans, unfortunately, have had better messaging. So I think we should not cede this issue of the economy to Republicans. But I do think in this very short window, focusing on these very divisive extreme policies and extreme candidates that Republicans have has been it has been, fortunately for us, galvanizing. It's allowed us to increase the voter rolls with more women, young people, and I think it's going to cause us to win independents. So I don't think the polling is showing the energy and the excitement, especially with early vote numbers being so high for Democrats. I don't think the polling is showing that continuing to work these issues, these very extreme issues that Republicans have given us and gifted us, means that we don't have to talk about the economy right now. I do think in the future, Democrats should stop ceding the economy because I think we're better on the issue all the way around.
All right, Yvette Simpson, Ramesh Ponnuru, we appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And ABC News Live will have complete coverage of the 2022 midterms on Election Day next Tuesday, starting at 7 a.m. Eastern, and special election night coverage led by David Muir and Lindsay Davis, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. Also, be sure to check out the groundbreaking political series Power Trip, hosted by George Stephanopoulos. We will have back-to-back episodes airing here on ABC News Live this weekend at 5 p.m. Eastern and streaming on Hulu anytime. The suspect charged with attacking House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband is set to be arraigned today. He's facing state and federal charges that could send him to prison for decades. This as we learn some new details about what police say he told them after he was arrested. Mola Lenghi has the details.
The man accused of violently bludgeoning House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer inside their San Francisco home is set to appear in court.
Violence has no place in this city, and we will work vigorously to hold the defendant accountable.
The district attorney announcing state charges.
The charges that we are filing today include attempted murder, residential burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, false imprisonment of an elder, as well as threats to a public official and their family.
The suspect, 42-year-old David DePape, is also facing federal charges in connection with the break-in, which include one count of assault of an immediate family member of a U.S. official and one count of attempted kidnapping of a U.S. official. If convicted, he could face up to 50 years in prison. And now we're learning new details about the suspect's apparent motivation behind the attack.
It appears as though this was based on his statements and comments that were made in that house during his encounter with Mr. Pelosi, that this was politically motivated.
According to a federal affidavit, DePape allegedly told San Francisco PD in an interview after the attack he viewed the speaker as the, quote, leader of the pack of what he said were lies told by the Democratic Party. DePape then went on to say he was going to hold Nancy hostage and talk to her. If Nancy were to tell DePape the truth, he would let her go. If she lied, he was going to break her kneecaps. DePape also later explained that by breaking Nancy's kneecaps, she would then have to be wheeled into Congress, which would show other members of Congress there were consequences to actions. Prosecutors believe DePape was prepared to detain and injure Speaker Pelosi and was armed with zip ties, tape, rope, and at least one hammer when he broke into the Pelosi home. When he did not find the Speaker, investigators say he told them that Paul Pelosi's actions resulted in him taking the punishment instead.
All right, thanks to Mola Lenghi for that report. And Pfizer says it has developed a vaccine for pregnant women that would help their babies battle RSV. The positive early trial data comes as the virus is driving surges in child hospitalizations across the country. Ariel Reshef has those details.
Hope on the horizon. A vaccine for the respiratory illness RSV in babies is in the pipeline.
So this is a tremendous breakthrough.
Pfizer says its vaccine is safe and effective, showing promising results in early studies. 82% efficacy in preventing severe sickness during the first 90 days of life, and 69% efficacy through the first 6 months.
RSV infects everyone, but among young children, the most vulnerable are those in the first few months of life. We have a high probability now of protecting against serious illness and hospitalization.
The more traditional protein-based vaccine would be given to pregnant women in the late second to third trimester in one shot. Expectant moms passing those antibodies to their babies.
RSV has a significant impact in our pediatric population, with over 50,000 hospitalizations each year in kids under the age of 5.
And the news comes as children's hospitals from coast to coast are feeling the crush with a combination of infections, including respiratory illnesses like the flu and RSV. About 76% of the nation's 40,000 pediatric hospital beds are full, with 8 states reporting more than 90% of their pediatric beds are occupied. Mackenzie Michaels says her 3-month-old son Everett was in the hospital for 4 days after contracting RSV.
It was pretty scary, sitting there watching him breathe. I'm just glad we got it as early as we did, or it could have been worse.
Though the new vaccine won't be available in time to quell the current wave, the FDA and CDC could sign off for the 2023 season.
And Pfizer says that more than 7,400 women from 18 countries are enrolled in this ongoing years-long study. They also say that the data is promising for people 65 and older, and they hope to expand that to multiple age groups in the future. Diane?
All right, Ariel Reshef, thanks for that. And families of the 17 people killed in the Parkland school shooting are giving victim statements today in court as the shooter faces life in prison.
Because of you, I will never feel safe again. This statement is offering just a crumb of closure for me, knowing that I will live with this until I take my last breath. I am disappointed and disgusted with the verdict that was handed to you. You do not deserve the best case scenario, and under any circumstance, the idea that you, a cold-blooded killer, can actually live each day, eat your meals, and put your head down at night seems completely unjust.
That was one of the 17 people he wounded who are also being given a chance to speak directly to their attacker. ABC News contributor and host of the Law and Crime Network, Brian Bruckmeyer, joins us now for more on this. Brian, these impact statements, they're just chilling. But what are the legal weight behind them? Can they change anything?
At this point, and in this case, the answer would be no. But generally speaking, if you had a case where a judge might have some leeway in terms of the sentencing, because what I often tell people is a jury can recommend a sentence, but a judge ultimately hands down the sentence. So in other cases where there's more leeway, this could affect a judge's decision. But in this case, I don't think so. It's going to probably just tug at our heartstrings and hurt, just like it is for all of us.
But the judge is expected to give life without parole regardless, because that's what the jury recommended in this case.
Absolutely. That, along with the sense that she cannot go higher. She can only go lower, and there's no lower for her to give based on the conviction that was handed down.
So what happens once he is formally sentenced? Do the victims and their families have any other recourse, or is this over?
From a criminal standpoint, no, it's done. There's no more recourse. They can't appeal for a higher sentencing. But from a civil standpoint, they may be able to go after him or his estate for financial purposes, but I don't / I doubt there's much for them to gain going through that avenue. So it's pretty much it for them.
All right, Brian Buckmeyer, always great to have your analysis. Thank you. Coming up, the Supreme Court could be poised to end affirmative action. What's at stake for college admissions and more after this. Welcome back. The Supreme Court could be poised to end affirmative action. The justices heard nearly 5 hours of arguments yesterday over the use of race in college admissions. Senior national correspondent Terry Moran has more on that. Hi, Terry.
It looks like the conservative majority on this court is ready to take another huge legal step and bring to an end the long era of affirmative action in higher education in America. In a 5-hour marathon, at times sharp, at times impassioned argument, the conservative justices repeatedly cast doubt on 4 decades of precedent upholding the use of race as one factor in college admissions. At one point, Justice Clarence Thomas even scorned the very idea that diversity could be beneficial on campus to students. He said, quote, "I've heard the word diversity quite a few times, and I don't have a clue what it means. It seems to mean everything to everyone." This court's upheld affirmative action time and time again over the years, but of course, this court is very different. And while those conservative justices were pushing to overrule precedents, the liberals, they pushed back. Justice Elena Kagan seeming to summon up the hopes that undergird the law of affirmative action when she said, quote, "I thought that part of what it meant to be an American and to believe in American pluralism is that actually our institutions are reflective of who we are as a people in all our variety." Now, if the court does overturn affirmative action in higher education, it can use the exact same reasoning to end it in American business and the American arts and so many other areas. And a ruling in this case is expected sometime next June. Diane?
All right, Terry Moran, thanks for that. Let's bring in ABC News Supreme Court contributor and professor at Cardozo School of Law, Kate Shaw, to break this down for us. Kate, the group challenging affirmative action says the 1954 decision, Brown versus Board of Ed, which desegregated America's schools, requires race neutrality. Can you walk us through the legal argument?
Sure thing, Diane. So the group Students for Fair Admissions, which is the plaintiff in both of the cases the court heard yesterday, one against UNC and one against Harvard, basically says that Brown versus Board of Education mandated color blindness in education, that by striking down segregated public schools, right, by ruling that separate but equal was inherently unconstitutional. That's what the court did in 1954 in Brown. And that basically the rule that Brown set forth was a rule that the Constitution doesn't permit any consideration of race. Now, the defendants in this case, the 2 universities and actually the federal government represented by Biden's Solicitor General, Elizabeth Prelogar, basically said that that argument that Brown mandates no consideration of race here is wrong in basically every respect, that there is a world of difference between mandating segregated public schools precisely in order to subordinate and to subjugate Black school children and to preserve white supremacy is a world apart from modest consideration of race when making admissions decisions at colleges and universities, precisely in order to build diverse classrooms for everyone's benefit. But essentially, those are the 2 arguments you really heard on display in the 5 hours that the court considered the cases yesterday.
Now, the Biden administration calls affirmative action a national security imperative. If the Supreme Court decides to rule against its use, does the White House have any potential recourse?
Yeah, Diane, that was a very interesting line in the argument yesterday. The Biden administration basically argued, picking up on an argument that got a lot of traction in a 2003 case in which the court upheld affirmative action. Basically, the argument is that the military academies use race-conscious admissions policies precisely in order to build a diverse officer corps that can command a diverse fighting force. We have a diverse military, and military leaders say we need to have diverse officers and diverse military leaders, and that national security compels it. And if we need to use some degree of race consciousness in making admissions decisions in the service academies, then that has to be permitted by the Constitution. And so the federal government really focused on this argument. And so, I think it is possible that the court, I think Terry is exactly right, that the court is likely to rule against Harvard and UNC and against most affirmative action policies in colleges and universities, but it could carve out an exception and basically say, because national security involves presidential prerogatives that are different from the kinds of interests in ordinary colleges and universities, we're not going to prohibit their use in those academies. It could just say we're not addressing that question today. So it could carve it out, but it also could call it into question. And then I think that, there could be a lawsuit that actually presents the question of affirmative action in the service academies. But I think that's something that did seem to give the justices some pause during the arguments.
Now, there was also a lot of debate about the viability of race-neutral alternatives to building diversity on campus. What are some of the proposals being put forward, and do the justices seem to be going for any of them?
That definitely was a theme in the argument. I would say a couple of things. One, some universities and some states have already attempted to adopt race-neutral admissions programs or policies, some of them because they're legally barred under state law from using race. And there have been kind of mixed results. So one example is the University of Michigan, which since 2006 has, as a matter of state constitutional law, prohibited the use of race in admissions. They've tried a lot of race-neutral alternatives, targeted recruiting, sort of big classes, and they've seen a significant decline in diversity, 44% decline in Black undergraduate enrollment, 90% decline in Native American undergraduate enrollment. So some race-blind alternatives have simply not been effective at building really diverse classes, but that may be the future that we're looking at.
All right, Kate Shaw, thank you. Coming up, the major new change for job seekers in a big American city, the new move to increase salary transparency. After this. Welcome back. South Korea's prime minister is vowing to make changes after a deadly stampede killed at least 155 people. An investigation is underway as the nation holds a week of mourning. The president is also calling for the use of drones and other high-tech crowd control resources. New York City employers now have to list a good faith salary for job openings. The move aimed at increasing pay transparency comes as level the playing field laws have passed in several states. A recent study found white women are paid 73 cents on the dollar compared to white men. For Black women, it's 64 cents, Hispanic women, 54 cents, Native American women, 51 cents. And if you're feeling lucky, you might want to pick up a Powerball ticket. Nobody won the second highest Powerball ever at $1 billion. That means the jackpot has now grown to $1.2 billion. I'm Diane Macedo. Do stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.